When the world learned of Robert Redford's death on September 16, 2025, millions mourned the loss of cinema's golden gentleman. But behind closed doors in the quiet sanctuary of his Utah mountain retreat, something extraordinary was happening in his final weeks. The 89-year-old legend wasn't speaking about his $200 million fortune or dividing assets among heirs. Instead, he was unburdening his soul to his beloved wife, Sibylle Szaggars, revealing intimate wishes that would make even the strongest hearts tremble with emotion. These weren't the typical deathbed confessions of a celebrity. These were the raw, unfiltered dreams of a man who had spent 6 decades in the spotlight, yet remained haunted by profound losses and driven by an unshakable moral compass. What Robert Redford whispered in those final days will forever change how the world remembers this towering figure of American cinema. Robert Redford carved his name into Hollywood immortality with iconic performances that define generations. From the charming outlaw in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid to the determined journalist in All the President's Men, he embodied the rugged American spirit like no other. But success came at a devastating cost. Behind the dazzling premieres and standing ovations lived a man scarred by unimaginable tragedy. His firstborn son died at just 2 months old from sudden infant death syndrome, a loss that carved a permanent wound in his heart. His first marriage crumbled under the relentless pressure of fame, and for decades he watched friends and colleagues, from James Dean to Heath Ledger, consumed by an industry that devoured its own. While Hollywood celebrated his achievements, Redford retreated to the mountains of Utah, building a simple wooden cabin surrounded by 10,800 acres of pristine wilderness. It was here, far from the manufactured glamour of Los Angeles, that he found his true calling, not just as an entertainer, but as a guardian of art, nature, and human dignity. Wish number 1, let my children live as ordinary people. In his final conversations with Sibylle, Redford's voice would crack with emotion whenever he spoke about his family. His greatest fear wasn't death, it was that his children and grandchildren would be forever trapped in the shadow of his fame. Live as simple a life as possible, he repeatedly told them. Don't let the world turn you into something you're not. Redford's vision was achingly beautiful. His family gathered around a crackling fireplace in the Utah wilderness, telling stories under starlit skies, living as nature intended, free from paparazzi, free from expectations, free from the golden cage that had both blessed and cursed his own existence. He had spent decades shielding his children from Hollywood's glare, understanding that fame could be a poison as much as a privilege. His final wish was that they would remember him not as a movie star, but as a father who chose love over legacy, peace over publicity. Wish number 2, remember me for what I built, not what I won. I don't need to be remembered for any scandals, Redford gently told his wife. I only hope that when people mention me, it will be for the films, the forests, and the values I tried to nurture. This wasn't false modesty, it was the confession of a man who understood that true immortality isn't measured in box office receipts or award show speeches. Redford wanted to be remembered as someone who used his platform to elevate others, who created opportunities for unknown artists through the Sundance Film Festival, and who never stopped fighting for the natural world that sustained his soul. Even as his body weakened, his spirit remained focused on contribution rather than celebration. The glittering trophies gathering dust in his home meant less to him than a single young filmmaker whose career Sundance had launched. Wish number 3, let me work until my last breath. Age was never an excuse for Robert Redford to stop creating. Well into his 80s, he continued directing, producing, and mentoring new generations of storytellers. To him, retirement wasn't rest, it was surrender. Why stop when life is still ahead of you and you still have the strength to live it fully? He once asked. For Redford, work wasn't burden, it was breath. Every film project, every environmental campaign, every moment spent nurturing young artists was another day stolen from death's grasp. His wish wasn't for a comfortable decline, but for a purposeful finale, creating and contributing until his heart stopped beating. Wish number 4, honor the son I never watched grow. Perhaps no wound cut deeper than the loss of his firstborn son, who died in infancy from SIDS. In his final weeks, Redford would stare out at the Utah mountains and whisper questions that haunted him for 9 decades. What would he be like? Would he walk and smile? Would he look like me or his mother? Every milestone his other children reached, first steps, first words, graduations, marriages, was shadowed by the absence of the boy who never had the chance to grow. Redford's wish was simple yet heartbreaking, that his family would always remember the brother who existed only in memory, who remained forever young in his father's heart. Cherish every moment of being alive, he told his children, because not everyone is lucky enough to grow up. Wish number 5, protect Sundance's soul. To Robert Redford, the Sundance Film Festival wasn't a business venture. It was his spiritual child. He created it as a sanctuary for independent voices, a place where art mattered more than profit, where unknowns could become legends overnight. Sundance is not mine, it belongs to the young artists, he insisted. His greatest fear was that commercialization would corrupt its mission, turning a temple of creativity into another corporate machine. Redford's wish was that future generations would guard Sundance's integrity with the same fierce devotion he had shown, that it would remain a place where dreams took flight, where impossible stories found their voices, where the next generation of filmmakers could discover they weren't alone in their artistic hunger. Wish number 6, don't let my life become an auction. While gossip magazines speculated about his $200 million estate, Redford saw his possessions differently. Every painting, every journal entry, every cherished memento contained fragments of his soul, pieces of a life lived authentically. I hope they remain as living mementos rather than being turned into luxury goods on an auction floor, he confided to Sibylle. His wish wasn't about money, it was about meaning. He wanted his grandchildren to hold his sketches and feel his presence, to read his letters and hear his voice, to understand that wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in the love embedded within every treasured object. Wish number 7, save the wilderness for future generations. Robert Redford's love affair with nature began in childhood and never ended. Even as his body aged, his commitment to environmental preservation only intensified. He purchased thousands of acres not for development, but for protection, ensuring that wild spaces would survive humanity's endless appetite for consumption. If I don't do it, who will? He asked, even in his final years. His wish was for a world where children could still discover untouched forests, where wildlife could roam free from human interference, where the earth could heal from decades of abuse. Through conservation easements and protective legislation, he tried to build walls against destruction that would outlast his own mortality. Wish number 8, give indigenous voices their power back. From his earliest days in Hollywood, Redford recognized that Native American stories had been stolen, distorted, and silenced by an industry that preferred stereotypes to truth. He didn't just collect indigenous art, he fought to amplify indigenous voices. Native art was never just decorative. It's alive with history, pain, and resilience, he believed. Through Sundance, he created platforms for indigenous filmmakers to tell their own stories, to reclaim narratives that had been hijacked for generations. His wish was for a world where Native Americans weren't museum pieces, but living, breathing artists with contemporary voices and urgent stories to share. Wish number 9, build a world without war. Robert Redford's vision extended far beyond Hollywood's borders. He dreamed of a world where his grandchildren would never know the horror of war, where conflicts would be resolved through dialogue rather than violence, where art would heal wounds instead of weapons creating them. Each of us bears the responsibility to choose the path of justice and peace, he told his family. This wasn't naive idealism. It was the hard-earned wisdom of a man who had witnessed too much suffering, too much division, too much hatred. His wish was for a future where compassion would triumph over cruelty, where understanding would defeat ignorance. Wish number 10, free humanity from oil's chains. Decades before climate activism became mainstream, Robert Redford was already championing renewable energy. In the 1970s, when solar power was considered fantasy, he was investing in its future, using his platform to advocate for clean alternatives to fossil fuels. Humanity must step out of its dependence on oil and turn toward clean energy, he declared when few were listening. His wish was for a world powered by sun and wind rather than coal and petroleum. A world where children could breathe clean air, where oceans weren't poisoned by oil spills, where the planet could survive humanity's presence rather than suffer from it. Wish number 11. Make Hollywood kinder to its artists. Having witnessed the tragic deaths of Monroe, Dean, Ledger, and countless others, Robert Redford understood Hollywood's capacity for cruelty. The industry that made him a legend had also destroyed people he loved, artists who burned too brightly and died too young. I hope Hollywood can be less cruel and more forgiving toward artists, that they have the right to be vulnerable, to make mistakes, to live a full life instead of being swallowed by fame's glare, he confessed. His wish was for an industry that nurtured rather than exploited, that supported rather than consumed, that remembered its artists were human beings before they were commodities. Behind every one of Robert Redford's final wishes stood Sibylle Szaggars, the German-born artist who became his anchor in life's final storm. While he spoke of legacy and dreams, she simply held his weathered hands and listened, understanding that love's greatest gift isn't grand gestures, but quiet presence. Sibylle wasn't a Hollywood wife seeking spotlight reflection. She was an accomplished artist in her own right, using colors and canvas to speak truths about environmental destruction and human resilience. When she met Redford in his later years, she saw not a movie star, but Bob, a man who still hurt from childhood losses, who still grieved his infant son, who still believed art could change the world. Their marriage in 2009 was characteristically simple. No Hollywood spectacle, just family and friends gathering in Germany to witness two souls choosing each other in life's twilight. For 16 years, she gave him what fame never could: peace. She brought me balance when I thought it was too late to find it, Redford once said. On September 16, 2025, in the stillness of his Utah sanctuary, Robert Redford drew his last breath. The mountains he loved so deeply seemed to pause in reverence. The forests he protected whispered their gratitude in the evening wind. And somewhere in the distance, a young filmmaker was probably editing their first movie, unaware they owed their opportunity to a man who died believing art could save the world. Redford left behind more than money. He left behind a blueprint for how to live with purpose. His 11 final wishes weren't legal documents, but love letters to humanity, roadmaps for anyone brave enough to choose meaning over comfort, contribution over consumption. The boy from Santa Monica who once doubted himself became a man who never stopped believing in tomorrow. The actor who could have been content with applause became a guardian of dreams, forests, and forgotten voices. And in his final moments, surrounded by the woman who loved him and the wilderness that sustained him, Robert Redford achieved something rarer than fame. He died knowing he had lived authentically, that his presence on earth had made it a better place. Today, as candles flicker at the base of Utah's mountains and flowers pile up at Sundance's gates, the world mourns not just an actor, but a conscience. Robert Redford's 11 final wishes aren't just dying man's dreams. They're marching orders for anyone who believes in the power of art, the sanctity of nature, and the possibility of human redemption. His children will live simply as he wished. Sundance will continue nurturing dreamers as he intended. The wilderness will remain protected as he demanded. And somewhere, somehow, the world will inch closer to the peaceful, clean, just future he spent his lifetime imagining. Robert Redford is gone, but his wishes live on. Not as whispered secrets, but as urgent calls to action for anyone brave enough to answer. The golden gentleman of Hollywood has left the stage, but his final performance continues in every life he touched, every tree he saved, every artist he inspired. In the end, that's the only immortality that matters. Honor his memory by sharing these wishes. Let his dreams become our commitments. Let his final whispers become tomorrow's battle cries for a better world.